What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to review Luc Besson's latest movie, DogMan, which stars Caleb Landry Jones in a role that is certain to generate a lot of discussion and debate if, and this is the big if anybody actually goes to see the movie. Because here is the pitch in a nutshell. Imagine a Venn diagram with a few different categories, where in one category you've got diehard movie fans who also love dogs more than life itself, more than their own friends and family members, and another category you've got movie fans that like slick, sometimes disturbing action movies and thrillers by stylish European directors. And in the third category, you'd have to have movie lovers who are interested in a central character where they're a horribly abused child, they grew up to be a wheelchair-bound, avenging angel of sorts, protecting the weak, who in their spare time likes to dress up like Marilyn Monroe or Marlene Dietrich and perform their best-known songs in this cabaret act. It sounds really French, but the movie actually takes place in New Jersey, of all places, and I have to say I found the movie to be wildly uneven, at times totally ridiculous, but at other times deeply upsetting or just in a profoundly moving experience in a lot of ways. And even if the movie doesn't quite stick the landing in satisfying fashion, I will admit there wasn't one single second in this entire movie where I was bored or uninterested. If this all sounds like something for you, have at it. So let's start with director Luc Besson. I haven't seen any of his movies since 2005 when I saw Angel A, but there was a time where I was definitely a fan, like Subway from the early 80s, La Femme Nikita, Léon, a.k.a. The Professional, are now sometimes listed as just Léon, The Professional, but it was The Professional in 1994 when I saw it in America. But also The Fifth Element. Like, all these movies made him an absolute superstar with film freaks in the 80s and 90s, and I still haven't seen The Big Blue, and I hear that might be his best. In any case, his classics have withstood the test of time. I have a brother who's a senior in college, and he's told me that he has gotten together with his friends and watched The Professional, and they're into it. So that movie is it's going to stick around. I have a feeling that movie is going to have a very long lifespan, and deservedly so. It's a kick-ass flick. And I don't think that Dogman's on the level of Luc Besson's best movies. However, it is deliciously fucked up in many ways, in ways basically that we don't really see anymore in movies. Like back in the 1990s, which was when I came of age. I spent high school and college in the 90s. But we used to get like this regular, steady deluge or diet of really fucked up foreign films and independent films where movies like David Cronenberg's Crash would come out and, shock everybody to the core of their souls and then kind of retreat. And I'm like, whoa, wow, like I'm glad we just survived that experience. What's coming next? And obviously the 90s had plenty of fluff and kind of disposable entertainment as well. I mean, that was the era of the great disaster movie and CGI colliding together, giving us movies like Volcano and Dante's Peak and Deep Impact and all that crap. But underneath, like the underbelly of the 90s, there was some really subversive, disturbing cinema going on. And as somebody who was between ages like 14 and 23 throughout the 90s, I ate it all up with a spoon. I loved it. But sadly, over the last 15 years or so, during this kind of bloated, glutted era of big budget franchises at the expense of like everything else, basically, we've seen the role of fucked up, disturbing cinema kind of take a back seat, or at least if you're going to find it, you're going to find it in different places. Maybe in books, maybe in video games, maybe in TV shows. But very rarely do we get the kinds of movies that seem to take perverse pleasure and delight, kind of reaching up through your ass and pulling out your lungs. But that is an experience that I crave, as strange as it might sound. I like to be shocked out of my complacency. If you eat a lot of spicy food, well, then you're going to be drawn to increasingly spicy food. And after a couple of decades of watching wild, crazy movies, well, then your appetite for wild, crazy movies will intensify. And I do worry sometimes that there's an entire generation of people that hasn't even really been trained to observe or appreciate kind of, how should I describe this? Like, to observe or appreciate or seek out what I would describe as like the theater of the grotesque. People that recognize that there is value in movies that are incredibly disturbing, but at the same time full of love and poetry and style and pathos. And that's what this movie has, because no matter how violent or disturbing it might be to see a child raised in a cage by his psychotic father who breeds dogs that compete in dogfights, like there's some really disturbing stuff here. On the other hand, there are at least 500 great cutaways or inserts of dogs doing the most precious, loving things that you have ever seen in your life. If you love dogs, your heart is just going to soar throughout the great majority of this movie, because it's like this perfect kind of like twisted mirror image where like the real world of human beings is pretty despicable in a lot of ways, and no one can be trusted, and people are violent. And anyway, it's just a world full of betrayal and heartache and sadness. And yet, when this character lies down on the floor and like 10 dogs like rest their head on him, like the love that comes flowing off the screen will absolutely melt even even the most cold dead heart imaginable. And to all the diehard dog lovers out there, how can I say this without giving away a spoiler? You're not going to see anything related to dogs where you're like, I'm upset that I saw that movie. If anything, your love for dogs will only be intensified. This is a graphic, violent movie in many ways, but you're not going to see like cruelty to animals and that sort of thing. And I guess that is a spoiler, but some people won't go see a movie if they hear that, like, something bad's going to happen to a dog. Like, I guess they're still avoiding seeing John Wick because of what happened to John Wick's puppy. But like, it's a great way to motivate the heroic actions of your character. And at the core of the story, the character played by Caleb Landry Jones, they are a hero. Like, in a lot of ways, almost like Batman, but instead of rushing out into the streets dressed as a bat and swinging around and beating people up, he's got his dogs. And this is where the movie enters into a realm of the ridiculous that you so rarely see, but it will make or break people's experience, whether or not they can kind of digest or accept some of the ludicrous things that happen in this flick. Because this movie in a lot of ways is grounded in reality and has a lot of very disturbing ingredients. On the other hand, it can't be but so disturbing if the central character, with but like a nod, can issue incredibly complex instructions to dogs that they follow like to the letter, to the T. Like they go out, like imagine like the most ridiculous episode of Lassie that you've ever seen. Like go get help, and like Lassie goes to like 6 or 7 different locations and communicates vast amounts of information somehow, and then ultimately ends up saving the day. You just have to accept the fact that without any sort of powers or explanation or supernatural abilities or anything like that, the central character here can communicate, like pretty lengthy instructions to his favorite animals, and they will just go out and do his bidding. And so it's silly and it's ridiculous, but it's also incredibly moving because if you love dogs, you're like, oh my God, like these dogs. I think if you were to remove all the horrific child abuse and if you were to remove all the pretty violent shootouts, although probably Leon the Professional is more violent on that front. I mean, the character played by Gary Oldman in that movie is pretty goddamn hardcore. But if you were to remove all the objectionable ingredients from this movie, what you would be left with is just a fascinating character study. And I guess as a way of kind of telling the story as a framing device, he gets arrested at the beginning of the movie. He's in full Marilyn Monroe attire. He's driving this truck full of animals, and the cops are basically like, who is this guy in a wheelchair? Why is he covered in blood? Like, what is his story? And so he sits down for an interview with a psychologist or a psychiatrist, anyway, a medical professional who basically just wants to hear his story. And so from childhood up to the present day, you just get different chapters of his life. And like I said before, I was pretty much riveted every step of the way, even if I won't say I was rolling my eyes when he was issuing really complex instructions to dogs, but I was just like, this is going to break a lot of people's ability to kind of suspend their disbelief. And so I think the audience for this movie is going to be incredibly small. But even if you're just a Caleb Landry Jones fan, I think at this point, like 10 years into his career, or maybe he's even been acting longer, he's a really dynamic, intense, powerful actor, and he just goes all out. And the scenes where he's impersonating Marlene Dietrich or Marilyn Monroe and singing those songs in the cabaret, he manages to capture the essence of Marlene Dietrich back when she was making all of her best movies with Joseph von Sternberg in their early 30s. They made 7 movies together, and I think some of them are better than others. But if you've seen Blonde Venus and The Blue Angel and The Scarlet Empress and Morocco and all their classics, you're going to be enthralled by these sequences where he's basically trying to capture like that confidence and that attitude that she possessed, that there's a self-possessiveness about her as well as the character played by Caleb Landry Jones, where he's so calm and so confident, but at the same time so wounded and in so much pain. He's in both physical pain and emotional pain, like everything that can happen to a human being in the first 15, 20 years of their life. It basically happens to him, and then he grows up to be this person who's like, all right, I'm just going to look after dogs and when possible, use my dogs to help other people, which brings him into contact with violent criminals and other people where basically he has to go into full-blown Batman mode. But Batman's probably the wrong comparison, maybe more like Robin Hood, because what he also likes to do is steal, and he's more than happy to send an entire pack of dogs to a wealthy person's mansion to make off with their best jewels and rings and necklaces and that sort of thing. And this is where the movie kind of reaches peak ridiculousness, where you're hearing music from like Miles Davis's album Kind of Blue while watching these dogs go on heist, and you're like, all right, this is definitely reinforcing a lot of French stereotypes when it comes to French cinema, hearing early 60s laid-back jazz while these dogs are doing impossible deeds of daring do. And I was like, all right, yeah, Luc Besson, yeah, like, you're giving me the full Luc Besson experience. But I think there are going to be a lot of people where they get to the scenes and they're just like, this is ridiculous. What the hell are we watching? But there are going to be other people who are like, oh my God, I've been waiting my whole life to see a movie just as weird and strange and unusual as this, because I can safely say I've never seen a movie before, and I doubt I'll ever see a movie after quite like DogMan. It stands alone, and in an era of endless franchise extensions and sequels and shared universes and all this nonsense, to see a movie that's actually original is just a very refreshing change of pace. Like yesterday, I saw the latest Godzilla, Kong, The New Empire, and last week I saw Ghostbusters, The New Empire, or Frozen Empire. Too many movies with Empire in the title, and they're just boring, interchangeable, where you know exactly the experience you're going to get prior to buying your ticket or stepping foot into the theater. This movie, DogMan, is going to keep you on your toes. And what's weird is how we've got DogMan now this weekend, and we've got Monkey Man coming out next week. And I'm fired up for Monkey Man. I'm seeing it Thursday of next week, and it looks like a totally badass movie. But maybe people will get to do just a strange double feature where they see Monkey Man and DogMan back to back. I expect if you want the full action experience, Monkey Man's going to be more satisfying. But if you like your movies to walk down paths that are seldom explored by human beings, well then DogMan's got your name written all over it. Also, I should mention, just in case this is going to factor into anybody's decision-making as to whether or not to see the movie, Luc Besson was recently cleared of all charges in the rape scandal that had been plaguing him over the last couple of years. And I'd been kind of hearing tidbits here and there, and you never quite know what's true and what's not. But it appears, judging from the multiple court cases that have all been now thrown out, dismissed, and the accusers even had to pay a few damages to Luc Besson, that the dust has settled and he can move on with his life. Once again, I wasn't there. I don't know what the hell happened. I don't know all the full details. I just know when it comes to the courts in France, I think there have been 4 trials or 5 trials. Anyway, he's been cleared of any and all wrongdoing, citing a lack of evidence. But I encourage everyone to do their own research and come to their own opinion about the veracity of those claims. So I'm glad I saw the movie. It was surprising. I have a feeling that the box office is going to be minimal, but don't be surprised if at the end of the year you see some people discussing this movie as one of the strange, unusual, unpredictable gems of 2024. I much prefer watching a movie that is stylistically uneven or dramatically uneven, where when it works, it really works. And also, I am completely, totally bored by and just fed up with really bland, boring, bloated, like $200 million franchise movies. Every once in a while, one of them will turn out to be pretty good, but they are absolutely the exception as opposed to the rule. And cinema needs to be more than just theme park rides. And I hate to basically like steal and echo everything that Martin Scorsese said like 5 years ago, where he said, like, these movies, like the roller coaster rides, they're not cinema. Luc Besson is cinema. And while The Fifth Element gave him like a brief shining moment where it did seem like he was going to achieve like big budget mainstream success in America, and that proved to be very elusive and definitely very short-lived. But there's no denying that Luc Besson is a full-blown French auteur. He's been making, some good movies and some bad movies over the last 40 years. But if you consider yourself a fan of Luc Besson, definitely check it out. And if you've never seen any movies by Luc Besson, within La Femme Nikita, The Professional, and The Fifth Element, and Subway, and I still need to see Big Blues. So that's all I've got to say about DogMan. Hope everybody's going to have a great weekend at the movies, whether you're seeing Godzilla, Kong, The New Empire, or DogMan, or whatever the case might be. Next week, I'm seeing Monkey Man as well as The First Omen. I love it when I get a chance to review 2 new movies in any given week. But thank you so much for listening to my rambling rant on this particular topic. Hope you enjoyed it. If so, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.